Hey guys, welcome to the show today. This is the Moonstruck Silver Lining. I'm your host, Ryan Wiggins. And today we have some guests from, the college and the university. You boys want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. Hello, my name is Amin. I'm a second-year student at Ontario Tech University. I'm currently studying nuclear engineering, and hopefully I'll do a minor in health physics.
I'm Andy. I was in CLBT in Durham College, but I'm switching into biotechnology.
Okay, boys. Today we're going to be tackling a big concept. We're going to be talking about ego and shadow. And, I kind of talked a little bit about it last week. We dived into a lot of concepts like Freud, and we talked about Jung just briefly. And, we kind of got into, how these subconscious patterns tend to affect our life. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think, and if you guys have anything to maybe build on to what we kind of deconstructed last week. Just any thoughts you might have on the concept overall about consciousness and how those patterns kind of play a role in our life.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in my day-to-day life, specifically in math, there's a lot of stuff that we learned at least when I was younger, is you're not supposed to understand theory, you're just supposed to accept it as it is. For example, people tell us 2 + 2 = 4, but if you actually look at the proof of it, it's 300 pages long, right? As something as elementary as 2 + 2 = 4, right? So when I ended up going here in university, a lot of the stuff that we do is much more theory intense. Like, there's no real application. First week was just understanding derivatives and limits, and the definition of a limit. Like, we were never taught that. Like, they talked about delta, epsilon, like the differences in curves, and I was like lost. I was like, what is this? You just give me a question, I'll just like subconsciously do it. But I never actually fully understood that. So that's something I took away from your last episode.
Okay. You got any thoughts, Andy?
I wasn't actually able to catch the full bit of the last episode. I was only able to watch small parts of it. What I mostly got was in the end, when you were just sort of, I guess, wrapping everything up and saying, like, bringing it over to how like ego and shadow and seeing the different patterns can affect your life and your outlook and your interactions.
I think that's very, very invaluable subject to touch upon, just how these kind of patterns do affect our overall life, because especially like in a high-paced environment like we're in nowadays, especially in a school setting where there's so much going on. Like, I mean, young people nowadays, we have like so much like put on us, like, oh yeah, you got to be successver at like 25 or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you need to be married after you graduate.
Yeah, you should have your Ferrari by 30 and whatever, right?
But I'm already in my midlife crisis.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that I think past generations didn't maybe have to think too much about. They could kind of go along with the flow a little bit, but I feel like in today's society, you do need to be like really conscious of where you are placing your energy and where you are placing your focus in life, because once you have that direction, it makes it much harder for obstacles to get in your way. So I kind of wanted to hear what you guys kind of thought about maybe the subconscious patterns and stuff like that kind of affect not just maybe us, but
previous generation.
Yeah.
Or like yeah. I mean, the issue with looking at subconscious patterns, at least to me, is the stuff that people did, like, say 30 years ago, maybe I guess like 50, even like a century ago. It's completely different than what we're doing now, because people have, for example, phones. You don't have to do calculations by hand, right? Back then they had to do it by hand, right? So maybe the patterns that we learned today wouldn't be very applicable in the past, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it's more so, if we had to look at the patterns of the past, it's more so to learn about how we can develop them rather than what the patterns themselves are.
Yeah.
I think it's important for, like, understanding how things are evolving from the past to the present, so that we can understand how things will evolve from the present to the future. Because, I mean, you can always think about what happened in the past, but you need to always understand, like, how things are going to go moving forward.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because as you repeat a pattern, you give more energy to that pattern, right? And it becomes more of that software program. And such an important concept, because, typically if we don't do self-reflection, or we don't take some kind of time to just be conscious and, analyze ourselves and the things around us, we're kind of stuck in those tracks, right? And we might not even realize that, we're in a prison of our own making, until we start to self-reflect and start to do that deeper work, and kind of understand what those conscious patterns represent.
What do you mean
Or,
by prison, by the way?
I mean prison kind of in the sense that, like, what's an example? Say, I'm trying to think of a mundane pattern that, okay, so say you go to school, and you have a list of things that you need to get done in your day, but, like, school, early morning class, whatever, you do that, and then you say to yourself, okay, I want to get the gym in today, whatever, I want to get that in later. And then you have a habit of blowing it off, because the semester starts, with a lot of work on your plate, and you're just like, and you just kind of let it fall by the wayside. But every day you kind of say to yourself, oh yeah, tomorrow.
So you're just letting this cycle, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That becomes the prison, the mindset of, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, right? Because it doesn't get done tomorrow ever, because it's always tomorrow, right? So it kind of having that mentality of, okay, where are we now? Like, I have this thing that I like to say to myself sometimes, and it's, what would I do if, with all the knowledge and wisdom I had, everything I've learned, I just restarted from the moment we're in right now? Because if you think of it, we can only move forward from the present, right? We have all the wisdom of the past, but if you let that weigh on you, then it's defeating the purpose of having that experience, right? Because it's holding you back, instead of acting as a learning or teaching mechanism to show you what you should either do or not do moving forward, right? So I think, like, even implementing some of those things, like hypnosis and some of those subconscious rewriting modalities are really crucial when gearing your life towards where it wants to go. I don't know, have you guys boys ever messed around with that a little?
I mean, specifically about restarting, in high school, specifically in my French class, I did no work. Like, I handed it, like, none of my homework and stuff. And then my teacher, he put me into, like, he talked to me in his office, and he was like, look, if you don't do your work, like, you don't hand it in, you're gonna fail. Like, and if you fail, this is gonna look really bad on your transcript, right? Like, specifically for high school, I wanted to get a scholarship.
Yeah.
So, if I failed that class, my average would drop, and I wouldn't get that scholarship. So I was like, look, I'll give you time. I'll give you a week. If you hand in everything, I'll act as if nothing ever happened. That was really my reset point.
Yeah.
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 I also had a very similar situation in English. I didn't really do much of the work, just because at the time it was like right in the swing of the whole COVID thing, and then that sort of like destroyed all motivation I could have had to continue doing schoolwork. And my teacher was like, look, if you do a few of these important assignments, I can overlook a lot of the small stuff, and I can give you the credit. And I was like, you know what? I guess, no better time to put myself in than now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, like, even when I feel like we approach the end of the semester, end of the year, when, everything's getting pushed right up to the last moment in terms of work. I don't know, you almost have like that same mentality, right? Where it's just like, okay, let's just like, grind away to like right to the end, and, kind of say, okay, this might have not played out exactly how we wanted. It might have not been organized or laid out exactly how we wanted, but, we're here now. What is the best move kind of on the board, right? And I feel like that is just in itself, the essence of what mindfulness is, that they try to teach in Buddhist philosophy and stuff like that. Because they don't run as much from, I guess, the thinking of, oh yeah, you should always be habitually doing what you need to do instead of consciously doing what you need to do, or acting consciously as you move in the world. Like I was even saying to somebody yesterday how like I was mentioning earlier, or like young people are kind of always on this trajectory of we need to get things done now because everything is so fast paced, but it's important just to kind of slow down and smell the breeze and smell the wind, and every once in a while, and just feel the sunshine on your face, because it reminds you that I'm here now. I'm not in the clouds. I'm not in my
Yeah.
thoughts. As much as we are, though, we are in our thoughts a lot, and we are in the clouds. But I think when we can learn to kind of ground ourselves and bring ourselves back down to reality, it's really important, right? And some people even do that by like going to the gym and stuff like that, and it's not even about the gym. It's just about like doing something that you feel is beneficial for you, and you just kind of get to work things out in your head, right?
It's also really important that we like develop a really healthy source of dopamine. Like a lot of people I see since I'm in engineering in first year, a lot of people are just like staying in the library like 12 hours, maybe like 13 hours a day, just studying. And like it happened to like one of my friends, and I'm like, dude, you gotta chill, like play some video games, go out, like like have
a
some
life.
exactly, have some fast food, and he's like, no dude, I gotta study for this linear algebra exam, you don't understand, I don't want to fail.
Yeah.
Like it's like sometimes you gotta calm yourself down. And even our teachers, that like our profs, they tell us that.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, if you do have a good healthy source of dopamine, it can help you calm you down, you overthink less, and there's like less brain fog.
Yeah.
Right? It helps you concentrate a lot more. And that's what I've personally found when studying, is that if I'm overthinking, if I got brain fog, no matter how many hours I put studying, I'm not going to remember anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. With like I guess just overworking yourself, it's putting in like a lot of work to get not really much out of it, because if you're not really having that sort of moment of clarity where you're getting out all the negatives and all the stress and all of the exhaustion and fatigue of overworking yourself, then you're just sort of like running on empty.
Yeah. That's one of the things I like that was mentioned is dopamine, because in today's society where we're always scrolling on our phones 24/7, like
Doom
it goes,
scrolling.
yeah, exactly, it goes through the roof, right? And it really impedes a lot of people to a degree over time, because I've seen even in my life how when I spend time on my phone more and spend time on my phone less, what the difference in all my patterns are, and my attention span and all the things that are related to that. And it's crazy how people don't realize, like, if you just detox for a little while, you can have a completely different mindset, right?
there's also that issue of motivation. Like a lot of people they lack motivation. I remember you mentioned motivation. People lack motivation to even stop. I mean, I do face the issue where I'm always on TikTok. I think if you check my phone, I've got about 3 hours daily on TikTok where I'm just scrolling. I know. So I remember I had a midterm. Actually, I have a midterm next week for chemistry. I don't know how to study. Like I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, I know I have to study. 35 minutes later, I'm pulling on my phone. I'm scrolling on TikTok. Like it's really an issue. So, and before I even opened TikTok or Instagram Reels, I had really good study habits.
Yeah.
I would sit there. I'd be able to sit there for even 10 hours, study, and then stop midway through, just work out or read a book, or play video games with my friends, then get back right to it. Now it's really an issue, and I didn't actually fully. I thought it was a joke. I thought people are dopamine detox. That's a joke, but no, it changes. It changes how you study and the rest of your life, how you interact with people as well in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's mostly the sort of good feeling that dopamine gives you. Like, oh, you see something nice and you're like, oh, that was nice, and then you go and you just keep trying to get more and more and more. And I think other sources of, I guess, inner happiness and
Serotonin.
that really helps. Even if it is something even still electronic, there's a lot of serotonin you can get through doing, I'd say, long forms of entertainment. So instead of like looking at like a 5-second video where you get that one shot of dopamine, then you go to the next 5-second video.
You look at a video essay.
Yeah, you can go to like a longer video that builds up and gives you that sort of I guess
Slower release.
yeah, it's like it makes you more used to getting like the boosts of happiness between longer and like more of a build up rather than just like a and then you know.
High up, high down.
And it also helps with like the flow of information, because in 15 like short form videos you only get like this huge dose of information in like shorter span. Video essays, or if you watch, for example, like MIT lectures or just like college lectures in general, like on YouTube, they're like long. They're like 2 hours, 3 hours. But if you can watch the whole thing and like learn how to be like attentive, listen to what they're saying, it can really help. It can really help you absorb information longer amounts of time without being bored or without feeling lost.
Yeah. Like, just to kind of draw this back to our topic of ego and shadow. How do you guys think maybe this manifests itself over time as people become more and more unconscious of these patterns, like so many of us are, especially like students, because we are, as you said, like under that pressure where you just sit in a library and think you can just grind away. And like something I'm reminded of a lot is like hard work is an absolute. You need hard work, but you also have a brain to be smart about how you work. And I used to have a friend in math class in high school, and he used to tell me, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And then he was right, and that's kind of what I went on a trajectory to kind of learn about after high school, how to understand things and how to improve my way of thinking, so I'm not just hitting the same pitfalls along every step of the journey, right? Because if you keep making the same mistakes, then you're never going to move forward and get where you want to go, right? So I'm kind of wondering what you guys maybe think about that, just on a concept of how these things kind of manifest itself outside of maybe perhaps the typical just addictions to dopamine and stuff like that, and how this really shapes a belief system.
I don't know about belief system, but it's definitely changed my habits. You obviously, I met you from playing volleyball.
Yeah.
I ended up going to like playing volleyball much less. Yeah, sure, maybe might have also been because of school, but I ended up finding out that I ended up like scrolling away like a lot during the night, and I lost hours of sleep. And then when I get to university, I'm like, I can't really do other stuff. Like I can't go to the gym. I can't go to the library and study. I just have to go back home, take a nap. And I wake up like really late. I wake up like 2 a.m, scroll. I don't even like wake up at 2 a.m. I end up like getting up at 6. So instead of being able to use my time efficiently for stuff that is much more valuable to me in my life, or being able to, for example, talk to my parents, like I get up at 2 a.m, like make sure my parents are sleeping, or if they're up, I can talk to them. Instead, I just end up like scrolling away until, the time is to get up,
Yeah.
In terms of, I guess in belief, I think the sort of like, if it's more, I guess like the doom scrolling and like the constant dopamine overflow that you're getting, I think what that mostly changes with people's beliefs is, for one, I can tell it makes a lot of people more irritable. Like, I don't know if anybody's gone on Twitter, but like
Elon platform.
Yeah, it makes a lot of people like I've seen a lot of people get very hostile for like over like very few reasons, and then like misinterpret almost to like a degree where it's like, are you doing this purposely? What like someone else says just to get angry. And I think that's mostly because you're not really giving yourself the sort of brain space to understand what negative emotions are, like sadness or anger. Because if you're just like constantly consuming like happiness, I guess, and like dopamine, it's not really giving yourself the space to sort of be upset or be angry or be and understand how to actually cope with that. And instead you're just like going around all moody all the time until you turn on your phone.
Yeah.
I agree with that, because when you're looking at content, it's usually recommended for you. You never get content that goes against you. So when you're like talking to people, for example, on Twitter and stuff, a lot of them like they oppose your views, especially like on large social platforms when people have like a varying amount of views, right? So people don't really know how to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who believes something different than them. So
Yeah, I think that's something good that you pointed out too, that it's important to recognize other people's like point of views and things like that, because it helps kind of that aspect of kind of understanding like what is in each other, that like why are we on this path, why are we on a path that is different from somebody else, you know, what are we meant to learn by interacting with somebody who's not the same as me at some level, right? And I that really leads back to the concept of human mentality and what really shapes, like, you know, these patterns unfolding the way they do. And I think that that's a really deep concept, because there is so much there. Like we were talking about earlier, like, you know, I'm not gonna count this out as a topic we could discuss here, animes and interesting themes that occur in animes. But, you know, if anybody's seen the end of Evangelion, spoiler alert, so, you know, you might want to cover your ears for this part. But they start talking about the concept that you can only see what is in somebody else's heart if you two are separate, right? Or you can only see what's in your heart by looking in somebody else's heart who is different from you, right? But they have this whole project where they try to, you know, accumulate everybody's consciousness into kind of one unified. How would you describe it, Andy? One unified, almost like consciousness or soul?
I think it's more so of like, and not to like, I guess, throw a weird buzzword, but I guess like a hive mind.
Yeah.
Of but instead of like a hive mind in the way that like an ant colony is a hive mind in a way that's like humans
Energy.
can traffic sort of energies to each other and like thoughts and ideals and all that, and you can get that sort of human experience of like infinitely, like, I guess, different people, and then you can sort of build upon that and like take the best parts and utilize those and take the worst parts and I guess either discard or suppress those in ways that are, I guess, advancing to, you know, a better future in a way.
Exactly, understanding what Miss Misato's place is in your heart, right? So I mean, yeah, that's a very invaluable thing that you brought up, that you really get to understand other people's experiences, right? Because that's what they kind of see, the characters kind of see from each other's point of view, right? Like they go back and get to see each other's childhood in some like kind of like mental consciousness mumbo jumbo. But they kind of get to understand each other and realize that, you know, they don't have to be so like snippy with each other, and that their like behavior patterns are kind of merited to some degree by the fact that, okay, they do all have complicated childhoods and stuff like that, and it does play an impact in their personality. You know, like I think Misato was talking about how she is playing the role of the do-gooder that's not the real her, right? So that's kind of an interesting concept, that, you know, you kind of shield your real self from the world because you have to, you know, go out in the world and you have to do things. And I feel like a lot of us kind of fall into that category of doing that, even if we're not very vocal about it, because, you know, I think all of us, you know, in the world have, you know, a part of ourselves that we kind of keep from the world, and, you know, it's just us and our thoughts at the end of the day, right? So that is a very interesting concept, that, you know, when you can see other people's experiences and when you can tap into that connection that resides between people, you can kind of understand things at a different level of complexity. And that really kind of shapes like how your soul will evolve and kind of manifest itself in the world, and, you know, what experiences you attract, right? Like I don't want to harp on Evangelion, but Shinji's talking about, you know, there is a reality out there where I'm not an Eva pilot, right? So I think that that's a really, really interesting concept. The fact that maybe they are all only in those roles for the purpose of understanding themselves.
And also, it also brings up like this sense of cause and effect
Yeah.
that maybe, you know, as they say, like, oh, what if, you know, like a historian, he went back in time and he moved this rock and it changes everything,
Yeah.
right? Like, who knows? Maybe, you know, maybe if I got a different scholarship, I wouldn't be here. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be here talking to you guys. Maybe if you never played volleyball on that one day, I would have never met you. So,
Exactly.
you know, it's really weird how the world works
Yeah.
and how time works as well.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah, and it's strange how, like, you know, like some people, like, who, you know, kind of go on this spiritual development, they could kind of almost see through the fissures of reality, where you can kind of see into the future and see, you know, things that can play out in alternate realities and alternate possibilities of life and stuff like that. And it doesn't really show you that there is kind of a light matrix that kind of constructs this reality. And one of the words I like that you use was cause and effect, because what they refer to as the body of the soul is also the causal body, which means that if you remove the cause, you remove the effect. So if everybody is a unified consciousness, then you can sort out the missing pieces of each other, right? So that becomes a really, really interesting concept
I
too.
like how you
kinda-
mentioned matrix, by the way, because
Yeah.
in math we use matrices to solve a certain amount of equations that, you know, if you were to solve one by one, it would be really hard. So you just end up putting them in this array, like a matrix, as you say, and you end up solving them. And it could yield different results depending on what equations you have in that matrix. So actually, it's a really good connection to cause and effect, because one variable change
Yeah.
can change whatever you get on the right side, the solutions that we call them. So who knows, maybe if instead of 2x I had 5x, it could change. For example, I wouldn't be here, I would be in Mars.
Yeah.
I would be in Japan, I would be somewhere else that wouldn't be here.
Yeah. One of the things is also too that you said is I think you said dimensions, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think that as you kind of unburden your soul and unburden your mentality as a human being, I think you do, like, on a spiritual level, you do go up in dimensions to a degree where you can see from a vantage point that you didn't see before. Like, think about it. Like, if you ever incurred something in your life that maybe was holding you back, or was like a mental block, or maybe you had like something that you felt was unresolved with somebody else, after you release that, do you not feel you had more clarity than you did before?
Yes, because I realized that sometimes I was wrong and not them. For example, a lot in high school, I would argue with my teachers. Not as in because I hated them or anything. It was more so, I think you got this concept wrong because this is what I think. But after you go back, you calm yourself down. You end up analyzing everything that you've said and analyzing everything that they've said. And this is actually one of the things I like, is that even though overthinking is technically bad, that's what people say, I like overthinking because it ends up, when I'm free by myself, I end up overthinking, and I end up realizing what I did wrong and what they did wrong. And I end up realizing, hey, you know, maybe I was wrong. Maybe what I said wasn't true. And I end up just sitting there, you know, just thinking about the stuff I could have done to make it better. And the next day I go up to my teacher and I'm like, hey, I know I was wrong. Could you help clarify some things? Maybe we can talk about it and move on from there.
More so on like the reflection and like how I guess reflecting on like the rights and the wrongs, and I guess looping back into the whole human instrumentality thing, and how, you know, having that combined consciousness can like pick out the rights and the wrongs, and then like find where you were right and how you got there, and then how they were right and how they got there, or how they were wrong and how they got there, and how you were wrong and how you got there, and sort of, I guess, converging those paths into one, I guess, unified right. I think in reflection, for one, it's not really easy. It's more easier said than done for like reflecting on what went wrong, because I guess especially when you're, I guess, calm, it is hard to see when you yourself are wrong, because you already have that internal bias that says that, or that kind of pushes you forward into thinking that you're always right. But
You have the tape recorder playing.
yeah. But I think in reflection, especially reflection with yourself and looking at where the sort of, I guess, blocks that built that sort of belief come from, where they source from, because a lot of like human belief systems and ideologies and one stance on one subject versus one stance on another subject, less of it is built more so on fact and more so of it's built on personal experience. I'm not saying that like and that's not, I should say that's not related to science, more so related to people and how they perceive that.
Yeah. One of the things that you said was that you kind of get a separation between what is like fact and what is experience, between what the person just kind of internalizes and maybe projects onto the world. And I think that that was really an important part of, you know, that whole instrumentality project, the fact that, you know, they kept getting almost barraged with, you know, their own voice saying things back to them that were, you know, they didn't want to believe, they were in denial of, right? That, you know, like, you know, when Shinji killed the other kid, what's his name, Kaoru or something like that?
That was the angel, right?
Yeah. So, and he's like, why did you kill him? And then he's like trying to make excuses to himself, but in some part of himself he knows that, you know, oh yeah, he shouldn't have done that, blah blah blah, whatever, right? He's having this dilemma within himself. And then you see the same thing for the other characters, right? Their denial is kind of stepping in their face as well, saying, you know, like just asking them the same question over and over, and not giving them anything else just besides asking them the same question until they're forced to analyze and forced to have that realization, right? Because it's not an experience, it's something that they're projecting, right? It's not a real reality. So like, you know, when he's saying like, oh yeah, everybody hates me, I know they do, and it's like, you know, those are just thoughts you put in your head, bud, right?
Yeah.
They're not real, right? So that's really interesting that you brought that up.
But also, when people, you know, for example, like Shinji, I never watched Evangelion, it's still on my list, but you know, when people say everyone hates me, it's more so because they've never had a proper, maybe, wouldn't say
Deep connection.
deep connection, entourage that supports them, like wholly supports them
Yeah.
because of who they are. It's more so it's more so based off of their experience. Like, my experiences have always been negative, and people have always have used stuff against me, or they've treated me like I'm below them. So as a result, I'm gonna start believing that everyone is against me. I have no friends, I have no family, everyone hates me, everyone's against me. So in a way, you have to kind of ground yourself and realize maybe it's just because of the people I've met. There's always that possibility that there's someone that you meet that will agree with you.
Yeah.
The chances is never zero,
Yeah.
right? It might be near zero, but it's never zero.
Yeah.
So in a way that you can start to uplift yourself, say, make it your goal. I'm gonna meet at least one person who agrees with me, or one person who can lift me up.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how you pointed out too that a lot of times I think we do kind of make friends or associate closely or gravitate towards people maybe just because we're in somewhat of the same circumstance. Like, for example, like, you know, you meet people in, like, you know, your classroom, or you meet people like for example, like we met in philosophy class, right? And we met at volleyball, but like if we didn't have anything outside of that activity, that interaction might not go further than that, right?
Mhm.
But when you start to connect with people, you start to build a connection where it is, oh yeah, we do actually think the same way, and we do appreciate each other's insight, and you start to build a real connection with other people. And I feel like a lot of times, like maybe nowadays, like that is something that seems to your point, beyond reach to a degree, because we do like a lot of us have this mentality of, oh, I want everything quick, it has to be like now, like, you know, why do I have to wait for this and that? But like, you know, the most valuable things are kind of built over time, right? So, and you appreciate it a lot more after you have kind of invested in that over time, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, you know, you made a friend at, you know, like in shop class or whatever, and then, you know, that's the only place we hang out, that's the only place we do anything. Like maybe we work on stuff outside of class for that, but the whole interaction you have with that person is based around the rationale that you guys are working on the same thing. It's not based on the rationale that you guys accept each other and you have a deep understanding of who each other are.
Yeah, exactly. And especially back when I was in elementary. So I just so you know, I went to a French school, and a lot of the people that I've known for minimum 7 years, maybe sometimes, you know, 13 years, 10 years. And a lot of them I disagreed with at first. You know, I wouldn't really hang out. I would talk to them, obviously. I was very talkative, but I wasn't really their friend, and they weren't my friend. And we never agreed. But over time, we started realizing that even though you disagree, you're still in the same place. You're still in the same classroom every single day. So you might as well set aside your differences and talk, either, you know, during recess or during classes, class workshops, etc., etc. And then you know, after talking to them, I realized, you know, they're not always, you know, they don't always disagree with you just to disagree. They have their own experiences, and their own experiences leads them to believe that what you believe is negative, what you think is negative. And as a result, I'm going to think that you're a negative person. So they basically correlate the two.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really valued those friendships because, you know, even though you disagree, you spent such a long amount of time that you learn how to accept people for who they are. And that's a lot of what a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
Especially in English. I see that in English high schools. You know, most of the people that they've known, like, quote unquote, the longest, 4 years, maybe 5 years, and their friends, you know, who they've been with for like 10 years, always agree with them. They always agree with them no matter what. It's not someone that they've started out with a disagreement with.
Yeah.
So what people should try and do, at least what I believe, is try and make friends, or at least build an acquaintance with someone who doesn't believe what you believe in, and try and, you know, elongate that contact, be able to talk with them at maybe 30 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, and over some time you will realize there is some common ground.
Yeah, you get back to that concept of experiences, and I think that's kind of an invaluable concept today, that does really dictate a lot of, you know, who we become in the world. And I think it's kind of interesting how, you know, what causes these to happen in the first place, because I think, like, we do, you know, we have this sense of karma or whatever. We have this concept of karma, you know, that has been talked about in old religions and spiritual texts for a long time. And I think it's kind of interesting, the fact that you do have people who are kind of more open to change, and then you have people who are maybe not as far on their spiritual journey, who are kind of in that closed off mindset where, you know, they'll always agree with you just to agree with you, or because it's been a pattern, right? And then you have other people contrastly who will always disagree with you just because they've always disagreed with you, and they identify that part of disagreeing with you with your identity over time, right? Because if they're not very conscious people, they're just going to repeat the same pattern over and over again, right? They're not going to sit down and think and say, okay, is, like, you know, am I listening to what is being said, or am I just directing how I feel at this person, right? So, and, you know, those are two kind of very, very interlinked concepts that you kind of got to be aware of, right? And it's just so interesting to think that I try to have the mentality sometimes that if it was just me in the world, if nobody else was real, if everything was just a projection in my mind, how would I want to live? Would I hang on to resentment? Would I hang on to things that hold me back? Would I hang on to hate? They talk about hate as a poison that poisons yourself, but it doesn't do the same thing to the enemy or the person you're directing it at, right? So it's almost like when you release those blockages within yourself, when you learn how to release shame, release guilt, release anger, release all those things that kind of drag you down or are negatively directed at things in the outside world, you kind of start to see, okay, I do have the potential to do a lot more than I thought I did because I'm not constantly focused on the things that are always holding me back, right? So it's almost like, to a degree in life, you become lighter and you do move up through those dimensions where you can make new connections with people, and you can, try to find that one person who you do connect with to that degree where you are able to have that genuine connection with somebody that you might have not had before, right? So I think that's a really invaluable concept, but I'm curious to hear particularly what Andy thinks on this, because he's got the whole Evangelion kind of interpretation as well, right?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with empathy with, like, you hear a lot about empathy with other people, but you also need to have empathy with yourself and understand yourself, because a lot of people don't really understand themselves all that well, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I think it's harder to understand someone else than it is to understand yourself. And I think both of those are sort of key to actually going forward, because knowing is half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad because not a lot of people are taught really how to understand yourselves, or how to understand what someone else is thinking, or understand how they got there, or what experiences built upon their life to bring them to that point. And mostly a lot of the issues I see in society, or with other people, or with my connection to the world around me, it's with empathy, and it's with this sort of misunderstanding or lack of understanding or inability to understand one thing or another, or a person, or how they like perceive me, and how we are disagreeing, like if someone else says something and then I say the other thing, there's not really, like, if you're just pushing against each other, there's not really any, like,
forward motion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's really interesting too, because I thought of something that I have actually personally experienced, and some people might look at this as a more spiritual phenomenon or whatever. Some people will say it's like synchronicity or whatever, but sometimes you'll be having a conversation with somebody you completely disagree with, but you don't hear actually the meaning that they're trying to force on you. You hear the meaning in the way that it's supposed to benefit you, because you're almost at a point where no one else's screw-ups can almost hinder you. So, it's almost like the point where, I can't say this word on the air, but you almost get to a point where nobody can mess with your energy so much to a degree where it will take you out of being in line with what you're supposed to be in line with. So, for example, somebody's telling you, nagging at you, oh yeah, you messed up on this, messed up on that, blah, blah, blah. And, you're not even thinking about the thing that they said you messed up on. You're thinking about something else that you think, oh yeah, you're right, I should improve that thing. But you're thinking of something completely different than what they're thinking about, right? Because what they're trying to do is not benefiting you, right? So you're not attracting that energy, right? Because you know who you are at that point, right? So you're not fazed by that to a degree that you would be, because normally you might get sucked into the spiral of somebody who's negative, where you just kind of banter back and forth with each other and it goes nowhere, right? As you were just saying. And if you kind of don't allow that to happen in your mind, you kind of say, I'm not going to take on that energy, it doesn't come to you in the same way it does. The person might say the exact same words, but you will not interpret it the exact same way that you would have, right? Because your brain's not allowing that pattern to develop, because it knows it's not going to assist you.
In a way, also, a lot of people use words and they actually mean the inverse. So who knows? Maybe the other person who's giving me these words specifically, and I'm interpreting them in my own way all the time. Maybe I'm not fully understanding them. Maybe I don't know if the words that they say are actually being hurtful to me, and I actually interpret it to be, like something that's supposed to support me, right? I think that we build this sense of interpretation where we can kind of bend what people say in our direction. So if I want someone to say something positive about me, or I think that they always think positive about me, whatever comes out of their mouth, I'm gonna kind of bend the meaning to be kind of like positive towards me. Like, for example, if you tell me, hey man, that's sick, but like you say that's like sarcastically, I might believe that you truly think what I did was like sick, like it was cool, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically how I view it.
I think there's a lot of I guess meanings into buzzwords, because a lot of people use a lot of words, and a lot of the times when you use I guess a buzzword, you use it in sort of the context that it was not really meant to be used in. I have a friend that I talk to a lot, and he puts a lot of emphasis on what words are like, especially in an argument on like whatever topic. He puts a lot of emphasis on what words are used, because you can't really use a word that like for something that what it isn't. Like you can't say like, oh, that's, I don't know, like if we were going on empathy, oh, that's like you don't really have empathy, when the person might have empathy, but they're using the wrong word to just sort of elicit that I guess their own point, and use it for their own, to further their own ideal.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of dynamic too when something like that does get into play in a conversation or discussion, because like sometimes you need to like understand the context too. Like what you're saying, I'm guessing, is more like in a debate kind of setting.
Yeah.
So like I feel like that it's good to be conscious of that. And then maybe what we were talking about earlier, sometimes where maybe it's the crappy coworker you have to like put up with or something, and they're giving you a hard time, but you can just kind of tune it out and just take from it what you need. That's the ideal thing to do, right? And then you have the other side of that where maybe when you're in a discussion you can't do that, or you have to maybe consciously be aware of not doing that to just be able to kind of discuss your points, right? Instead of it being about taking on negative energy, you're actually trying to extrapolate some kind of information or wisdom from that person, because you are in a situation where you're open to learning or supposed to be discussing something, right? So yeah, I think that's a very invaluable point.
In a way, also, you can extrapolate information, I think, out of any conversation. For example, you were talking about people who are constantly at war with each other and they're staying there stagnant. You could probably use that as an opportunity to learn how to either make them move forward, or how you can move forward. You can kind of experiment with the way that you engage with them and see, maybe is that going to help them move forward? Is that going to help them prove their point? Is it going to help me prove my point? So you can kind of use it as a way to, I guess, evolve, or a way to
like Pikachu, eh?
Yeah, literally, exactly. So you can try and, like, I guess you could say in math we would say like parameters. You could kind of like edit the parameters and see what result that gets you.
Yeah, I like that. The idea of taking these different like how you were saying, like when people are pushing against each other, understanding what like the sort of parts they're coming from, and like understanding what they're trying to say and the information that they're trying to, I guess, push onto you. And then if you're talking to someone who has critical thinking skills, they can also do that with you, and then you can both sort of instead of pushing against each other, you can then move forward.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me of this I don't really want to get into too much politics, but there is a political party that its like motion was like, bridging the gap between left and right and sort of moving forward from that.
Yeah, I think that yeah, this is a really good concept. I was just thinking about shoot, I had a thought. I lost it. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, sure. When you were talked about the bridging the gap between the left and right side politically, I was also thinking of, there's like, that one meme where it's like you have like this beautiful castle on the right and you have like this dark like little reverse
that one.
yeah, exactly. I was thinking, why don't you just like you yourself try and carve a path down the middle, right? Exactly.
Middle path.
Yeah, exactly.
Middle path. Like
exactly.
Buddha talked about. I was actually hoping that would kind of come up as a concept today, because I was just thinking, like, if you think of it, subconscious, we often relate it with, darkness, shadows, kind of the unseen and whatnot. And we could kind of see that in like things like when we go to sleep. When we go to sleep, it's like pretty much lights out. Like, we don't remember too much unless we're consciously trying to like do some dream work or, like leave the body or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Astral projection type stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that is, it's I don't know, it's just so interesting how you have like almost the two sides of the coin, like, conscious, subconscious, light, dark. And when you do find that middle path, because I feel like that is why we're here, if we just had to choose, like, being in complete alignment with the universe, I feel like there wouldn't be individuality. I feel like the whole reason we exist at all is because things are different, right? Like, if this table was made out of the same like stuff as, well, I mean, it is to a degree, but like, I mean, in the physical, if it was made out of the same stuff as, everything else, like, that would be a very different reality we're living in. But it's so strange how everything is actually made from light and constructed from light, our portion of the universe anyway. But it's different, right? Like, the material that this hat is different than the material of the table, right? So understanding that everything is connected, but there are differences there, allow you to like kind of chart that middle path, right?
Even in nature, if you look at, for example, air, oxygen, we cannot breathe pure oxygen. It has to be mixed with other
O2, yeah.
Exactly. O2, maybe carbon, and not just oxygen itself, but different isotopes of oxygen, where it is oxygen, but it has a different weight. It has a different amount of neutrons.
Yeah.
Different
right?
charge.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So that's what I was thinking as well. And I liked how you mentioned the two sides of the coin, because even though there's two different faces, there's always that little thin separation that even if you were to take it to like the microscopic level, there's always that separation no matter what.
Yeah, I think that it really highlights that concept of that, when they talk about falling, for example, in like religion, like, Lucifer fell from, the sky, he was the brightest of all angels and he fell. I think it kind of emphasizes that point that no matter if you're an archangel or you're a human being, if you're on some kind of spiritually developing path, you do have the ability to fall off that path, but it is getting back up and figuring out kind of, where you want to direct your life towards and where you want to go. And, as I said earlier, letting go of those things like hate, resentment, anger, frustration, shame, guilt, all those things that hold you back, because you got to kind of think of it. Is this it? Like, there's this scene in Last Airbender, not the crappy new remake.
Oh, the OG.
Yeah, the OG version, where Uncle Iroh, the OG of wisdom, NT, is talking about, you need to look within and start asking yourselves the big questions. Who am I and what do I want, right? Because if hanging on to that resentment, if hanging on to all those things are not going to help you get to where you want to go, it's not worth carrying it with you, right?
Yeah, and it's specifically Uncle Iroh. Like, he was talking to Zuko, who was doing stuff not for himself, but for his father.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a really good reference.
For a destiny he thought was his, but he was saying, like, is it your own destiny or is it a destiny somebody else has tried to force on you? And I think that's the way a lot of people feel in life, that, we do have almost a destiny that is forced on us. And maybe we'll wrap it up here today. We're coming into the last minutes of the show here, so I think that kind of sums up today's episode. So we've covered some topics. We covered kind of subconscious patterns. We covered addiction. We've covered human mentality. And I think all these concepts really go into kind of defining why we're here, what we see in other people, what we're meant to extrapolate through those experiences, and really defining who we want to be and the power that we do have that potential to be that person, whoever it is, right? Whoever it is that we want to be, you can become that. And there's no amount of anything in the universe that can stop you from becoming that person if you truly believe within your own heart that that is made for you, right? So we're going to wrap up here. So follow us on DC Media Hub. You could follow me on Instagram at Top Sorcerer. I don't know if you guys want to throw in your Instagrams too, if you want.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I don't use Instagram.
But this has been the Moonstruck Silver Lining here on Riot Radio, and we'll see you in the next show.